If you're like me and love to serve up a hearty breakfast in the morning, but sometimes find it's really hard to pull off, then I've got some great ideas for you. Today on Paula Roy's Favorite Foods, I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite breakfast recipes, all of which can be partially prepared ahead of time, making it a snap to serve things up first thing in the day. Tomorrow you is really going to like today you. Fruit salad's a staple on lots of breakfast menus, but today I'm going to show you a really neat variation. We're going to take beautiful fresh melon, some crisp bacon, mint, and a really nice vinaigrette, and it's just the most delicious breakfast salad ever. I really like to work with a honeydew melon because I just really like the green color, but you could use cantaloupe, watermelon, really whatever your favorite melon might happen to be. And lots of melons are grown in Canada now, so you can always watch out for that at your favorite produce store to see if you want a local option. And there's no easy way to cut up a melon other than just getting it into segments and then quickly peeling them. But of course you want to scoop the seeds out first. And these pieces don't have to be super small. I'm just going to peel them off the rind and then I'm going to cut them right into my bowl. And of course you can do the melon prep the night before, which is part of the great make ahead to speed things up. In the fridge, it will be absolutely great overnight as long as it's wrapped or covered. Really, you can make the pieces whatever size you like. Bite size is usually a good thing to aim for. This salad can be scaled up depending on how many people you have to feed. And you can also prepare the dressing and the bacon, which I'm about to show you ahead of time to speed things up. Then it's just a matter of quick assembly in the morning. I'm just going to make a small bowlful here today. This melon's really fresh and juicy. It just is so nice to cut up. And one more quick piece here. There we go. There's a nice little serving. We'll set the rest aside. So we've got some bacon here in our frying pan that's just crisping up, and we're just going to give it a few more seconds to finish. And while that's happening, we can get our dressing ready. So we've got some honey here, which is a nice base. It's a nice complement for a breakfast salad. You don't want anything that's too tart or tangy first thing in the day. We're going to add some lemon juice. And I usually use a strainer when I'm doing this, and an inexpensive wooden reamer is just a great way to get juice out of your lemons. You need about the same amount of lemon juice as you have of honey. That was a really juicy lemon. Just need a little bit more. Amazingly, this lemon doesn't seem to have any seeds, which is very unusual. Great. And we're going to add a little bit of Dijon mustard, and the advantage of Dijon is it helps your dressing emulsify or hang together. So it's a really great option for all kinds of dressings. And just a little bit goes a long way, so it won't make it too tangy. Some salt and pepper. Not too much salt because, of course, the bacon is going to add salt to the salad. And the pepper is a nice contrast with the melon. We're just going to give that a little stir. It's always important to add your salt before you add your oil because the salt won't dissolve in the oil. So it's dissolving right now in the lemon juice, which is helpful. And then we're going to add canola oil or olive oil, whatever you prefer. In this case, I've got some olive oil because I just really like the flavor. And of course, we know it's really good for us. And you'll see I like to make my dressings in little jars. The reason for that is it makes it super easy to combine them. Just put the lid on tightly and give it a little shake, and then your dressing is done. If you do it in a bowl and whisk it, then you just have a little bit more work to do. So this just works out well, especially if you're going to make it ahead of time and put it in the fridge, then you've got it all ready to store. So that's all set. I'm going to just give it one little taste to make sure that it's balanced. That's perfect. Put the lid back on so I can give it one more shake before we add it to the melon. Now our bacon looks really good. It's nice and crispy. So we're going to pull it out. And I often pre-cook bacon, packages and packages at a time, and then store it in the freezer layered in a container, layered between sheets of parchment paper. So you can pull out some of that pre-cooked bacon and give it a final crisp before you add it to the salad if you want. And that's just a super easy way to do it. Another nice option if you don't prefer bacon is you can use ham or prosciutto for this salad, and that would be equally delicious. And then because the bacon's so hot, an easy way to cut it into bits for your salad is just to use some kitchen scissors. So I'm just going to chop it, and because I can hold it in the paper towel, it's not too hot on my fingers. And you just kind of want to coarsely chop it, again, in small bite-sized pieces. The smaller you make them, it'll look like there's a bit more on the salad, and people will feel like they're getting extra bacony treats. There we go. And we'll just kind of spread those around. And now we're going to drizzle on our dressing. And we're going to do that before we add our final garnish, which is mint, because the mint will become a little bit discolored if too much dressing is sitting on top of it. And we have a lot of dressing here, more than we probably need for this amount of melon and bacon. So I'm just going to spoon a little bit of dressing over. And you can see the olive oil gives it a nice yellowy hue, as does the honey as well. And it doesn't need too much because the melon is so juicy. You want to give the flavor of the dressing, but you don't want to drown the fruit or the bacon. There we go. And then last but not least, we're going to cut up some fresh mint to add on top. And the mint is a really nice option with the melon. It just seems to punch up the flavor a little bit more. So we're just clearing the decks here. And if you don't grow mint in your garden, I highly recommend you consider, you just need to get one small plant, tuck it in a corner where it's kind of out of the way, and it'll just go crazy. And I find I use mint a lot more often now because I have it close at hand. And it just adds such a great pop of flavor and color to things. I'm going to use quite a bit for this recipe because I really like mint. And because it's a perennial, it'll come back year after year in your garden, which is just so handy to have. Great for cocktails, and you can even make things like mint jelly to go with lamb. And it's nice on savory and sweet salads. I think that's a good amount. So we're just going to kind of coarsely chop it. So the easiest way is just to pile it into a nice little bundle and then quickly cut crosswise. People tend to like smaller pieces of herbs in their salads, so it's nice to cut it up a little bit finer. Some varieties of mint have smaller leaves, and in that case you could easily use whole leaves. There's a variety called chocolate mint that has a really neat flavor that would also be great on this salad. So now we're going to sprinkle the mint generously on top. And that's it. That's all we need to do to have our beautiful salad ready. So as I mentioned, cut your melon up the night before, pre-cook the bacon so you can crisp it up at the last minute, make your dressing ahead of time, then you can assemble all that, chop up some fresh mint, and your salad's ready to go.
I absolutely adore baking with apples. The biscuit recipe I'm about to show you is inspired by my love of apple pie, served with a wedge of cheddar cheese, of course. This is a delicious breakfast treat that's great for folks looking for a grab-and-go option, and they freeze beautifully as well. I'll show you how you can partially prepare them ahead of time so they're super quick to finish in the morning and serve up warm.
I predict that 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, kids who like to cook won't even know what this tool is. It's a pastry blender, but there's so many better ways to incorporate butter into mixtures for biscuits and pastry and so on. My favorite is the box grater, and I'm going to show you why. One of my favorite breakfast treats is biscuits. Sweet, savory, doesn't matter. I love them in any form. Today I'm going to show you how to make my new favorite, which is apple pie biscuits. They've got cheddar in them because I like my pie with a little cheese on top, and they're super simple to partially prepare the night before, then bake up fresh in the morning. So as I mentioned, box grater is the best thing. We've got our flour in the bowl, and we're going to add some sugar. We're going to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of baking powder. Give that a quick stir, and we're going to put the butter in. And you can do all of this the night before. It doesn't hurt the mixture at all, and then it's so quick to pull it out onto the counter and start again. So as you can see, I've got some butter here. You want it pretty cold because it's going to get warm in your hands. And I'm just using the coarse side of the grater, and I've got it wrapped in some plastic wrap just so it doesn't stick to my warm hands quite so much, and the wrap will kind of slide up out of the way for the most part as you grate. So you can see how we've got just these nice little shards. Of course, it looks like, you know, mozzarella cheese or something like that. And we'll just keep going. You have to work fairly quickly. I can feel it getting warm under my hands. If possible, you can even use butter that's been in the freezer for a little bit, and that's an even better way. Another option, of course, is to mix up the flour, salt, sugar, and baking powder, and then cut the butter in using a food processor, and that works perfectly well also. I wouldn't go on to assemble the biscuits completely in the food processor because it would probably overmix them. You can see I've got a couple of big lumps left here, so I'm just going to set those to the side of my bowl, reach into my grater and pull out any bits of butter that have accumulated. You can make biscuits with shortening if you prefer, but I just really like a butter biscuit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix in the shards of butter with my hands just to coat the butter with the flour, and that helps it to stay apart so that it'll be evenly mixed. And the few larger pieces that I have, I'm just going to rub them apart with my thumb and forefinger and again mix them in. And you just kind of toss it as though you were tossing a salad and rub and toss, and then the butter will be nicely separated and all ready to go. If you have room in your fridge, it's great to refrigerate this mixture overnight because the butter will be nice and cold when you proceed, but if you don't, it doesn't really matter. So there, we've got our butter and flour perfectly mixed. And just because you never know if you've got pets or prying partners or fruit flies in your house, it's a good idea to cover it. I really like these silicone lids. They're nice and sturdy, and they're so strong you can even lift the bowl up with the lid, which is pretty cool. Nice little party trick. So we'll set that aside. And now we've cut up 2 apples. I really like to use Gala apples because they don't turn brown as quickly as some other varieties. And in fact, I've just read that they've supplanted Red Delicious as the most popular apple in North America. So there you go. And we're going to mix up a little cinnamon and sugar to flavor the apples, and that's the typical apple pie kind of flavoring profile. If you like ginger or nutmeg, you can easily add that in instead of or in addition to. And we're going to put about 2/3 of this mixture on the apples, and that will also help to keep them from browning. There we go. And a little lemon juice for a pop of flavor, and again to reduce the opportunity for the apples to go brown. So there we go. We'll give that a little stir, mix it all up, and you'll note that the cinnamon and sugar just starts to stick nicely to the apples, so they'll all be super flavorful. And once again, we'll cover that, and ideally in the fridge, but it doesn't matter if you don't have space for that either. So there we go. To get ready for the morning, I've measured out the milk that we need for the biscuits. I've grated some cheddar cheese. I've used a combination of old and medium because that's what my family likes. And I'm all set in the morning. I'm going to have my baking sheet prepared with a sheet of parchment paper. And then in the morning I'll assemble, and I will preheat the oven when I do that. So now we go on to making the biscuits. We've got our flour mixture. We're going to add in our apple mixture. I think people think biscuits are hard to make, but they're really, really not too tricky. This key, as I mentioned, is not to overmix the dough. I'm going to put in our cheeses. There we go. And just combine all of that so it's fairly evenly mixed before we add the milk. The trick is making sure you get the liquid down to the bottom. So as you can see, I'm kind of pulling half the mixture to the side to get it out of the way. There's part of our milk. I'll give that a little stir. This is another way to ensure that you don't overmix it. And then the rest of the milk goes on top. And the dough might look like it's not quite hanging together, but it really will come out just fine. You can always add another teaspoonful of milk if you really feel like maybe you didn't measure the flour quite accurately and the dough looks a little too dry to stick together. The best way to bring it together is with your hands, which I'm going to do in a moment. And I like to work on a sheet of parchment paper when I am forming my biscuits because it just keeps the counter so much cleaner. So even though this mixture is still a little dry, as you can see, not to worry, we're going to put it out on our parchment worksheet here. Making sure we get all the cheese and apples and butter and so on. And we'll give our spoon a little scrape. And like I said, the best way is just to get in there with your hands. Get our bowl out of the way. We've got our baking tray at the ready, and we've got our biscuit cutter at the ready. And the oven's been preheated to 425. So I'm just going to work this a few times just till it comes together in sort of a shaggy ball of dough. You want to make sure that there's not too much dry flour on the bottom. And again, if you have overmeasured your milk, for example, you can always sprinkle a little bit of flour on the top and bottom and work that in. But I think this is just right. So we're going to pat the mixture out. You want it to be about 1/2 inch thick, 1.25 centimeters if you cook in metric. And you can re-roll or re-pat out the dough. So I like to make sure that I don't waste any dough when I'm making biscuits. There, that looks pretty good. And yes, my hands are a mess, but it doesn't matter. So now we've got our baking sheet, and we're going to cut our biscuits. An important thing when you're cutting biscuits is to go straight down and straight up. If you twist the cutter, it actually compresses the edge of the biscuit and makes it hard for the dough to rise. So we're going to lay these on our baking sheet here. And the reason for parchment paper is a selfish one. It's just great for cleanup if you don't have to wash your baking sheets afterwards. Plus, of course, things don't stick to the parchment, which is super helpful. There we go, and then we're just going to re-roll these little bits. We can incorporate up the little bit of dry flour that's on the bottom. And you just kind of want to fold it rather than really jamming it together. The folding seems to help the dough develop into nice little layers. So depending on the size of your cutter, you can get between 9 and 12 biscuits from a batch of dough. And if you don't have a biscuit cutter, you can easily use a drinking glass, a canning jar, whatever you have on hand. And I think we can still get a couple more. Like I said, I don't like to waste any of the dough, and there's no reason why you can't pat it out. The last few that you do may take on a slightly different shape from the dough being worked a bit more, but they're still delicious. There we go. 1 and 2. And then our last step before they go in the oven is to sprinkle some cinnamon and sugar on top, left over from our previous batch. And again, that's keeping with the pie theme. You can actually freeze the biscuits at this point if you want, or just bake them up fresh, like I said, in the morning. And here you go. Your apple pie biscuits are hot out of the oven and ready to be devoured.
Coming up next, I'm going to share a great twist on a Tex-Mex favorite. You might think of enchiladas as a dinner or lunch option, but if you swap out the meat filling and add beaten eggs, you've got an amazingly delicious breakfast treat that can be assembled the night before and baked up fresh right before serving. I'm making a vegetarian version today, but you could easily add bacon, chopped ham, or crumbled cooked sausage meat to the filling if you like.
Of course, what breakfast is complete without eggs? And I've got a really tasty way to serve them up. Breakfast enchiladas are satisfying, delicious, and really a crowd pleaser. So we're going to make these by mixing together some diced tomato. This is a vegetarian version, but you could easily add bacon or ham, sausage, really anything you like, cooked up sausage meat or dried salami. And we've got some green onions for a nice pop of flavor. Black beans, so that's our protein in this vegetarian version, plus a classic Mexican ingredient. Some grated cheddar, and that's our basic filling for the enchiladas. So we just need to stir that up, pretty straightforward. And again, for a make ahead, you could combine this topping or this filling and just put it in the fridge overnight if you wanted, or you can actually carry through and assemble the enchiladas and bake them up fresh. I'm going to use corn tortillas today. These ones aren't gluten-free, but I find they have a much better flavor than the regular flour tortillas. There are gluten-free corn tortillas out there that are delicious as well. So if that's a consideration for the people you're having breakfast with, it's good to know you can get them. So we're going to spread a good half cup of this mixture on each tortilla. And it doesn't have to be scientific, just pop it on there. And then we're going to roll them up. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Before we put them in our pan, we're going to give it a quick spray with cooking oil. You can easily just grease it with some olive oil or vegetable oil if you prefer. And now we'll fold it up, roll it up, try and tuck the fillings in so they stay in, but if they sneak out, it doesn't matter. And then put it in the pan. And you want the pan to be fairly fully packed, so we're going to be able to fit 4 in this small pan. And of course, there's other things you can add in if you have favorite ingredients. I just kept this pretty simple for a breakfast option. And rolling it up, in it goes. And then we'll sneak the last one in. Tuck it right in there on the side. There we go. So next up, we're going to use 4 eggs to make our substantial filling. And we're just going to whisk those up. And then you think of this as kind of an omelet sort of preparation. So we'll add some salt and pepper. And then we're going to add some cream. It's not heavy cream, it's 10% cream. I like the richness you get from that, along with a little bit of milk just to round out the filling. And you want to make sure that's fairly well blended. And again, if you wanted to assemble this in stages, you could tuck this dish into the fridge as is, have this mixture whipped up, and then you could pour it over the top in the morning. So it's pretty flexible in terms of when and how you assemble it. And now we're just going to pour this over top, and it will find its way down into all the nooks and crannies all on its own. Your pan should be fairly full by the time you're finished. And then we're going to top it with some more green onions, partly for a color contrast, but also to boost the flavor since our filling is not too strongly flavored. You could put on some chopped chilies if you wanted on the top. Again, it's pretty free-form, however you like it. And then a bit more of the cheese on top. That'll help the topping be nice and crunchy and crispy. And then it's going to go into the oven for about 30 to 35 minutes. And here are our beautiful breakfast enchiladas ready to be devoured. Add some sour cream, salsa, whatever you like, guacamole, and they're just delicious. Today I've given you 3 crowd-pleasing options for a delicious breakfast that won't leave you exhausted in the morning. Melon bacon salad, apple cheddar biscuits, and breakfast enchiladas are sure to get everyone's day off to a great start.